welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy. I hope you're doing really well wherever or whenever in the world that you are. Today, we're gonna be talking about my favorite books from 2024. I've decided this year, I'm not gonna actually rank my favorite books. It was just feeling too hard. And I love all of these books with my whole heart. I love them equally, but for different reasons. And it didn't feel fair to rank them. There were just too many good books this year. Really, I had a really good reading year. So we're gonna talk about the 10 best books I read, my 10 favorite books that I read, the 10 books that brought me the most joy, the most tears, the most insight, whatever. I'm gonna gush for a lot of it today, actually. I'm gonna go kind of chronologically, I guess, the books that I read in January, February, March, and beyond. We'll start from the beginning of the year and go to the end of 2024. I also have a few honorable mentions. I have 3 honorable mentions that I'll talk about at the very end. Without further ado, let us begin. In January, I read Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson, and I loved this book. It was so quirky and whimsical and adventurous. It just was an utter delight to read. I had so much fun. It had such like classic fairy tale adventure vibes. It was such a pleasant surprise, especially given the other stuff from Brandon Sanderson that I've read. It just tends to be like a little bit more serious and a little more intense. And this was not that. And it was kind of like a breath of Brandon Sanderson fresh air, if you know what I mean. In this story, we're following our main character, Tress, as she goes on an adventure to save the boy that she loves. So wholesome. I think Tress has a really interesting and strong character arc. I really loved the found family elements. There's some really funny and entertaining side characters. And yeah, it's just like very whimsical and magical and fun. And it still has like all of the really good world building and character development that you can expect from a Brandon Sanderson book. It just like felt lighter, I guess. I loved it. It was great. Highly recommend. It was a really fun time. In February, I found my like true love fantasy romance series. Now, I know I just said that I'm not really ranking these books, and I'm not. But if I were going to, this series, because I can't just pick one from it, this whole series would be number 1. I have reread this series, honestly, probably 4 times this year, and there are a lot of books. So I have a real problem. It's so good. If you are new to my channel, you might not know, but if you've been here for a while, you probably already know what I'm gonna say, and that is the Mages of the Wheel series by J.D. Evans. I originally discovered this series by playing my very first round of reading roulette in February, where I had to read a fantasy romance from my Kindle TBR. I got this book on Kindle, oh my God, I don't know, 5 years ago, and just like didn't really feel motivated to pick it up. And thank goodness for reading roulette pushing me to do it, because I'm forever changed in the best way. In the first book, you are introduced to Naime and the world of Tamar, and each installment you followed a different couple, but the plot and the world building kind of expands from one installment to the next. You definitely need to read them like in order, don't skip around. And I love it because all of the characters that you meet from earlier books show up in later books, and the plot grows and the character development like continues to grow from book to book. It is like honestly perfection to me. I will accept no negative feedback. There is kind of this elemental magic, but it feels more sophisticated and more complex than like, I don't know, Avatar, Airbender stuff. It's like really interesting. The political machinations and scheming are intense and thought-provoking and so stressful. The romance, the chemistry, the steam, oh, so good. It's so good. I also just think the world building is so fascinating. It gets bigger and more complicated and more interesting with each book installment. And I know she's writing, what's the next book called? Bird and Blade, something like that. And I like cannot wait. I cannot wait. I've all the books on Kindle. I have all the books on audio. I would recommend the audiobook narrators are fantastic. First of all, this series is inspired by like Middle Eastern culture and lore. And so there are definitely like character names and places. I don't know if they're actually Arabic, but it's helpful to have like the narrators pronounce certain names and places. After I read the first book, I had never craved like Mediterranean food so hardcore. It was like really, oh my God, they're so well written. They're so interesting, especially like the powerful and interesting female main leads are truly divine. I'm obsessed. You gotta read it if you have. Tell me which installment is your favorite. I'd love to know. In May, I read an essay collection called Are Women on the Ground? And essentially this is Arab women from different countries in that region sharing their experience as female journalists. And they talk a lot about like the diverse challenges, the advantages, and they highlight different perspectives of like what that job is like. And the editor, Zara Hanker, explains that the aim of this collection is to really shatter stereotypes about women in that region. I think that it's such an important and valuable perspective. And I think that this essay collection is really, really profound and really, really eye-opening. These essays are equally fascinating, exciting, horrifying, stressful, and insightful. Like, I think that this essay collection really stresses to me how important it is to read stories and books and essays and poems and all that from people who've lived different experiences than you, because they're so important, they're so informational, they're critical in developing like perspective taking and empathy and connection. And I just think this essay collection is so good. It's so powerful. It feels like a must read to me. Like if you were thinking about it and just haven't read it yet, like you absolutely should. I wrote down a few of my favorite essays: Maps of Iraq by Jane Araf, Just Stop by Iman Helal, Between the Explosions by Asma Al-Ghul, and An Orange Bra in Rahaja by Donna Abu Nasir. I'm sorry if I mispronounced. I did the best that I could. I have never learned so much, felt so much. I'm so glad that I read this essay collection. It's really stuck with me and it's really, really good. On like the complete other side of like the quality, no, not quality, of like the serious, like literary, what am I trying to say, Andy? Okay. And my next favorite book that I read in May is very different genre. That's what I want to say. This was my favorite historical romance that I picked up from 2024, and it was Would I Lie to the Duke by Eva Lee. We are following our main character, Jessica, as she comes with this like elaborate scheme to save her family business. And of course, along the way, she kind of runs into and connects with this very misunderstood and handsome Duke named Noel. Jessica and Noel have exceptional banter. I found myself literally giggling at times. Like their back and forth was so engaging and so entertaining. And I really liked them as individuals and as a couple. And I think sometimes in a romance, that doesn't always happen. Like Jessica is really clever, really resourceful, and Noel is surprisingly sweet and caring and compassionate when he, has this kind of bravado of like, I'm this cold, distant rake kind of thing. And it was just so interesting throughout the book to not only like peel the layers of them as individuals, but also to watch them get to know each other and come together. It's so fun. It's paced really well. I enjoyed every minute that I was reading it. I think if you've not read a lot of historical romance, this is a really good one to start with because the plot and the character development are like what I liked the most. And I think the historical setting is sort of like tangential to that. It's really, really fun. The ruse is like so stressful and so chaotic, but it's a really, really good time. I highly recommend. In June, I came across probably my favorite contemporary romance that I read the whole year. And I know that I said I wasn't ranking them. And if Mages of the Wheel is like number 1, this is like just under that at number 2. But again, like we're not ranking them, so who cares? But that is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is the 3rd book in her Part of Your World series. and it is literal perfection to me. In this installment, we're following Emma and Justin has a very funny curse where every woman that breaks up with him then immediately goes on to like fall in love and find the love of their life. And on a Reddit thread, him and Emma connect because she has the same curse. And so of course they come up with this plan where they're gonna date for the summer so that they can break this curse. And when they break up, they'll go on to like meet their loves of their life or whatever. And of course, as they get to know each other, you know, they fall for each other because it's a romance. Oh, it's so good. There is so much mutual pining and heartache and desire in this book. The steamy scenes are really intimate and like so worth it. I think in this book in particular, but all of Abby Jimenez's books, each character is really well developed and they have their own really complicated life history. And in this book, you get to explore a lot of Emma's childhood and how that impacts her as an adult. And you get to do the same for Justin, and you get to watch as they like learn each other and learn how to be there for each other and to support one another. And it's really moving. It's really emotional. I would definitely recommend, if you're gonna pick this up or any of Abby Jimenez's books, definitely look at the content warnings, because there is some heavy on-page and off-page stuff that's talked about. And so, you know, if you're mindful of that, just take a glance at some of the content warnings. But yeah, I love this book. I love this whole series, but this book is probably my favorite of the three. I love their romance. I love their relationship. I love their banter. I love their intimacy. I love the heartache. I love the struggle. I love it all so much. I could truly gush about this book for hours. If you want more in-depth thoughts on this book, I guess, when it was a little fresher in my mind, I talked at length about it in my 5-star reads book back in, I don't know, July-ish or August-ish. So I'll link that above or down below, but it is so good. Like 8 stars. I would give it 10 stars if I could. Now, right after I read that book, I think shortly after, I also read this next favorite book from 2024, which is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I also really love Emily Henry's books. They're a little more hit or miss than me than Abby Jimenez, but this was a real home run. In this one, we're following Daphne and Miles, and Daphne's fiance dumps her to be with his childhood best friend, who happens to be Miles's girlfriend. And so for reasons, Daphne and Miles end up living together. And again, for reasons, there's a bit of a fake dating trope. It is just so much fun. Their back and forth, their banter had me like tee-heeing the whole time. I loved it so much. It was really fun. I was giggling and I just loved it, you know? I had the best time reading this book. So it was really good. I would say if you've read other Emily Henry's and you've not loved them, so you weren't gonna pick this up, I actually think this is one of her better ones. So you should. I think it's worth the hype. It really is. My next favorite, I don't remember which month that I read this in, but at some point after June, I read A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, and I was not expecting to love this as much as I did. This is a really interesting story. It's written in second person, I guess, because the structure of the story is that one of Dracula's wives, Constanta, is writing a letter to him. It's really a fascinating and like hauntingly beautiful story. There are definitely themes around abusive relationships and intimate partner violence. You get to really know Dracula's partners, and you get to know their relationships with Dracula and their relationships with each other. And it's a really fascinating, moving story. I think there's some weird like PR or marketing around this, that it's like a steamy paranormal romance, and like that is not what this book is. This is like a very moving, emotional, dark story, and I think it's deeper than just like Dracula's wives retelling. Like it's like a very intimate story. Overall, it's a really quick read, but it is a stunning read, and I actually think there's a part 2, or like will be a part 2, and I must read it. I must. Alrighty, the next favorite book that I read this year was Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. I am slowly but surely on my journey through Stormlight Archive and entering the Cosmere. It is an overwhelming but delightful and exciting experience. I don't want to say anything because, like, spoilies. I don't want to ruin anything, but I'm obsessed. And this second installment in particular was so fun. The ending was crazy. It was so good. It was thrilling and exciting. So many unexpected things came up, and I just cannot wait. I'm hoping to pick up Oathbringer in January, and so I'm ready. I'm here for it. I finished Edge Dancer or whatever in December, that little novella, and I'm ready. I'm ready. It's really good. You know, people talk about the Stormlight Archive a lot, and it's like completely deserving of the hype. Brandon Sanderson's world building, character development is unparalleled. I mean, the way that he can write so much and yet so little happens, and yet you feel completely drawn in. It is truly magical. I love this series. I loved Words of Radiance. I can't wait to continue on. In November, I read the 9th and like most up-to-date installment in the Outlander series called Go Tell the Bees That I Am Gone by Diana Gabaldon, and I loved it. I know that it's not everyone's favorite installment in the series, but I was in heaven being back on the ridge, back with my favorite people. I loved the kind of mundane, domestic moments. Like, I love that shit. And I also loved the intense, suspenseful, like scary moments. I love that series. And I also especially loved William's story in this particular installment. And I really loved Ian and Rachel's story. It was just so wonderful. I just feel like when I'm reading these chunky books, I just feel like I'm wearing my favorite, most cozy sweater with a heated blanket by a fireplace with my favorite beverage, like the coziest vibes. Even when like shit has gone horribly wrong, it always works out. And I love this series. I really love this series. Again, I know it's not everyone's favorite series, and I also know that this installment is not everyone's favorite, but I loved it. And then closing out my list, my December favorite book, I guess, was Finding Me, Viola Davis's memoir. It was really good. My sister got it for me for the holidays, like a little bit before Christmas. She's so sweet. She got everyone in our book club books, and she did like A+ job because this was a spectacular recommendation and selection. And I have to say, I read quite a few really beautiful memoirs, so it was a really tight race, but I think this one was my favorite. This memoir is a raw, honest, and really insightful exploration of memory, trauma, love, resilience, compassion, and like so much more. I especially loved because obviously she's sharing a lot of the heavier stuff that happened in her early childhood and growing up, and how her family really struggled in poverty, with abuse, with violence, drug addiction, and alcoholism, and things like that. And so there is a lot of heavy stories, like a lot of stories around suffering and hardship and abuse and neglect and harm, but it's balanced really nicely with these equally loving stories of joy and connection and triumph and resilience and like sisterhood and friendship, and it's just really moving. There are lots of little anecdotes. Like, one of my favorites is she's telling this story about how her mom mispronounces mimosas, like she calls them lamises or something like that, and that Viola Davis, she was like, I stopped correcting her because I actually find it a bit endearing and kind of charming. And that little story resonated with me so much because my mom also pronounces so many things incorrectly, and we love to like give her a hard time, but it's also like so endearing. And so I just felt like that little moment, I felt so connected to Viola Davis and her life and her story, and it was a really beautiful memoir. I will say there are times that feel a bit repetitive, but I get why that's there. And I still think that even though there are times that it's like, I get it, she finds new insights, so it doesn't feel like overkill or overboard. I also especially loved like when she starts talking about like her Hollywood stuff. I was like obsessed with pulling up IMDb because I wanted to like follow along in her filmography and be like, oh, who was in this movie with her? And oh, I wanted to like look at the face of the actor that she mentioned, and it was just really interesting. I think it's such a captivating story, and I deeply appreciated her kind of insights and reflections on like healing from trauma. And it's just like a really powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit. And I think it's really, really beautiful. It's really well done, and I highly recommend it. It's good. And I think I'm late to the party with that, but it is really, really good. As I mentioned, I do have a few honorable mentions. These were books that like weren't quite my favorites, but have really stuck with me this year and are books that I wanted to still highlight and gush about. One of our first book club picks for Broads Who Book in January was Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. It was a fascinating read, and it has really stuck with me this entire year. Like I still think about that story sometimes, and that's really unexpected because I had never heard of it. I was kind of like, meh, whatever. I wasn't that enthusiastic about reading it, but it was one of the most fascinating book club discussions that we had. And yeah, like I said, it's really stuck with me. You're following this couple, Miri and Leia? I can't remember. But anyways, Leia comes back after this like deep sea mission gone wrong. And Miri's like so excited to have Leia back, but she quickly realizes that like not all is as it seems, and like things are not well. And it is a haunting story. Like there are so many moments that literally gave me the heebie-jeebies, but also even with kind of the like scary things, it's still like beautiful and emotional and completely captivating. It was a really interesting book. I think the ending in particular is very unsettling and definitely made quite a few of us emotional. And so it was a really unique read. I don't think I've read anything like it since, certainly, or before. And yeah, it was a really good book. It's definitely one out of my comfort zone, and I'm really glad that we read it. Another one of my favorite contemporary romances from this year, it's not like quite my top favorites, but like I had to mention it, is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This is a second chance romance between Yasmin and Josiah, and it was so good. The mutual pining in this story is like palpable. It's such a like raw and heartfelt, sexy and intimate, emotional story. I just completely fell in love with this couple. It's actually part of her series called the Skyland series, and the third book comes out in 2025, and I cannot wait. But yeah, I don't typically like second chance romances, but this one really, really worked for me. Their chemistry felt so believable, and I understood them. I just felt like I was rooting for them so badly. It was really, really good. Oh, there's just so much angst. I loved it. And then my final honorable mention is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I read this in April with my apartment book club, and this might be the best like feel-good, heartwarming story that I picked up this past year in 2024. You're following, I think her name was Toya or Taya. Either way, she befriends an octopus as she's like working as the cleaning lady at this aquarium, and they form a friendship, and the story kind of goes from there. I mean, obviously it's about more, but it is a really wholesome, feel-good, heartwarming, like sweet story. It's a little bit cheesy, it's a little bit corny, but like by the end I got a little emotional, a little teary-eyed. It's also one that's really stuck with me, and I find myself thinking about it quite a bit. My sister-in-law just read it and also really loved it. So I just think it's like a really safe, feel-good, heartwarming story. Like, I think I've said heartwarming like 14 times in this description, but like that is the vibe of that story, and it was an utter delight to read. So yeah, there you go. My favorite books from 2024. It's kind of an eclectic mix, sort of. I mean, it's a lot of romance, it's a lot of fantasy, but there's a couple other things in there. a memoir, a weird gothic horror book, Anyways, I had a really good year of reading. I loved so many of the things that I picked up. It was a really fun year and I'm very excited to continue reading into 2025. I just love reading. Anyways, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. You can leave a book emoji. Ooh, or tell me what your favorite book was from 2024. I'd love to know. Consider liking and subscribing and like doing the YouTube things. And that's it for me today. Thank you guys so much for being here. Happy New Year, happy reading, and I'll see you in the next video soon. Bye.